Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, it's Bhagavatam, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 21, and this is Text 8. And this is translated with commentaries by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And there's no way to get rid of this light on the glasses, so just have to live with it. And this is the chapter is the this whole section has been discussing. Sukadeva Goswami has been relating to Maharaj Parikshit in quite a bit of detail the structure of the material universe. And this particular section is about the movements of the sun planet, and the personality, the spirit soul, who is the predominating personality on the sun, or the sun god, commonly known as Surya or Vivaswan. And he's known by many other names also. This is text 8 and 9. Living entities residing on Sumera mountain are always very warm, as at midday, because for them the sun is always overhead. Although the sun moves counterclockwise, facing the constellations with Sumera mountain on its left. It also moves clockwise and appears to have the mountain on its right, because it is influenced by Dakshināvarta wind. People living in countries at points diametrically opposite to where the sun is first seen rising will see the sun setting, and if a straight line were drawn from a point where the sun is at midday, the people in countries at the opposite end of the line would be experiencing midnight. Similarly, if people residing where the sun is setting were to go to countries diametrically opposite, they would not see the sun in the same condition. To try and visualize these descriptions is it's a challenge. Best thing I think that I can do at this point is just to hear them, and then hear them again, and then hear them again, and I may get some realization of the how this is constituted, but I think we'll just read them. There's no purport. Prabhupada hasn't made any commentary, so. But there are devotees who are constructing a Vedic planetarium in Mayapur as to His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada's desire was to have this in 3D models so that people could experience what's being discussed here. And so this planetarium, it's quite elaborate, and it will certainly be awesome and breathtaking. Pretty overwhelming display is under construction in Mayapur. So the great souls who have taken this task, pretty exciting. The whole world is waiting to have this planetarium certainly be one of the wonders of the world. Text 10. When the sun travels from Devadani, the residence of Indra, to Samyamani, the residence of Yamaraj, it travels 23,775 yojanas, or 190,200,000 miles in 15 gatikas, 6 hours. So the sun is moving quite quickly, 190,200,000 miles in 6 hours. That's moving. Purport. The distance indicated by the word sadikani is Pancha Vimsati Sahasradikani, or 25,000 yojanas. That plus 2.5 crores and 12.5 laksha of yojanas is the distance the sun travels between each two cities. This comes to 23,775 yojanas, or 190,200,000 miles. The total orbit of the sun is 4 times that distance, or 95,100,000 yojanas, which equals 760,800,000 miles. So that would be 24 hours. The sun travels 760,800,000 miles in 24 hours. These are very precise calculations. Text 11. From the residence of Yamaraj, the sun travels to Nimlochani, the residence of Varuna, from there to Vibhavari, the residence of the moon god, and from there again to the residence of Indra. In a similar way, the moon, along with other stars and planets, becomes visible in the celestial sphere and then sets and again becomes invisible. Prabhupada's commentary. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Nakshatranam ahamasi sasi, of stars I am the moon. This indicates that the moon is similar to the other stars. The Vedic literature informs us that within this universe there's one sun which is moving. The Western theory that all the luminaries in the sky are different suns is not confirmed in Vedic literature. Nor can we assume that these luminaries are the suns of other universes, for each universe is covered by various layers of material elements, and therefore, although the universes are clustered together, we cannot see from one universe to another. In other words, whatever we see is within this one universe. In each universe there's one Lord Brahma, and there are other demigods on other planets, but there's only one sun. Interesting. Cannot see from one universe to another because the universe is covered with layers of material elements. And whatever we see in the night sky is within this one universe. And there is only one sun within the universe. Text 12. Thus the chariot of the sun god, which is Traimaya, or worshipped by the words Om Bhurbhuva Sva, travels through the 4 residents mentioned above at the speed of 3,400,800 yojanas, which equals 27,206,400 miles in a muhurta. So we say miles per hour, and they say yojanas per muhurta. The Vedic calculation for speed is yojanas per muhurta. Text 13. The chariot of the sun god has only one wheel, which is known as samvatsar. The 12 months are calculated to be its 12 spokes. The 6 seasons are the sections of its rim. And the 3 chaturmasya periods are its 3-sectioned hub. One side of the axle carrying the wheel rests upon the summit of Mount Meru, and the other rests upon Manasotara mountain. Affixed to the outer end of the axle, the wheel continuously rotates on the Manasotara mountain like the wheel of an oil pressing machine. Oh. Continuously rotates the wheel of an oil pressing machine. Hey. Text 14. As in an oil pressing machine, the first axle is attached to a second axle, which is 1/4 as long, 3,937,500 yojanas, or 31,500 miles. The upper end of the second axle is attached to Dhruvaloka by a rope of wind. Text 15. My dear king, the carriage of the sun god's chariot is estimated to be 3,600,000 yojanas, or 28,800,000 miles long, and 1/4 as wide, 900,000 yojanas, or 7,200,000 miles. The chariot's horses, which are named after Gayatri and other Vedic meters, are harnessed by Arunadev to a yoke that is also 900,000 yojanas wide. This chariot continuously carries the sun god. Prabhupada's commentary. In Vishnu Purāṇa it is stated that the 7 horses yoked to the sun god's chariot are named Gayatri, Brihati, Ushnik, Jagati, Tristup, Anastup, and Pankti. These names of various Vedic meters designate 7 horses that carry the sun god's chariot. So we can understand what the principle is when we say chariot. Chariot doesn't mean just wood and metal and horses made out of flesh and blood. But this chariot is constituted a little differently. It's made out of the material elements, but it's constituted a little differently. But the function of a chariot is to transport. And a chariot is drawn by something or someone draws a chariot. So this chariot, the horses, they're not the kind we're used to that go and eat oats. They're not those kinds of horses. They're a different kind of horse. And the chariot itself, the wheel of the chariot, composed a little differently of the material elements. We're hearing here about a planet where the living entities there have bodies, fire bodies. They're not earth bodies, they're fire bodies. And So things are constituted a little differently there, but the functions are the same. The function of a chariot, can be recognized to be a chariot in which the sun god is traveling. Once we can get to a place where we're not identifying with our own material covering, our own material body, then that leaves a lot of room for being able to perceive how in different atmospheres and on different planets things may be constructed a little differently, using the same material elements, but constituted a little differently. So this is what we're hearing about, what type of chariot this is on the sun, for the sun god. Text 16. Although Arunadev sits in front of the sun god and is engaged in driving the chariot, controlling the horses, he looks backward. He looks backward toward the sun god. Prabhupada's commentary, in the Vāgavata Purāṇa, the position of the horses is described. Although Arunadev is in the front seat controlling the horses, he looks back toward the sun god from his left side. Text 17. There are 60,000 saintly persons named Valakiliyas, each the size of a thumb, who are located in front of the sun god and who offer him eloquent prayers of glorification. Valakiliyas, the size of a thumb, in front of the sun god, offering prayers of glorification. So they're also in the chariot, evidently. Text 18. Similarly, 14 other saints, Gandharvas, Apsaras, Nagas, Yakshas, Rakshasas, and demigods, who are divided into groups of 2, assume different names every month and continuously perform different ritualistic ceremonies to worship the Supreme Lord as the most powerful demigod Suryadev, who holds many names. Okay, so they're worshiping the Lord through Suryadev. He's the representative of the Supreme Person for these residents of this sun planet. It's interesting that there are demons in here as well as demigods. Of course, you've got the 14 other saints. Okay, Gandharvas, they're singing beautifully all the time, Gandharvas. Apsaras, heavenly society girls or prostitutes. The Nagas, these are serpentine creatures. The Yakshas and the Rakshasas. The Rakshasas are man-eaters. And the demigods, divided into groups of 2, and they continuously perform different ritualistic ceremonies to worship the Supreme Lord. Or they're worshiping Suryadev. Yeah. Begin to wonder if maybe some of these, like Rakshasas and Yakshas, they're worshiping Suryadev. They recognize him as the most powerful living entity on their planet, but they may not be approaching him for serving Krishna. But by approaching him, they're somehow or other connected to serving Krishna. Because Rakshasas it's not really their thing to worship the Lord. They have other ideas of what they want to do. but by serving Surya Dev, then they do have some connection there. It's interesting. Prabhupada's commentary in the Vishnu Purāṇa, it is said, and it's like 3 verses in Sanskrit, this translation basically, worshipping the most powerful demigod Surya, the Gandharvas sing in front of him. The Apsaras dance before the chariot. The Nisacharas follow the chariot. The Panagas decorate the chariot. Yakshas guard the chariot. And the saints called the Valakilyas surround the sun god and offer prayers. The 7 groups of 14 associates arrange the proper times for regular snow, heat, and rain throughout the universe. Ooh, yeah, okay. The Yakshas guard the chariot. So they're performing service to Surya. Yeah. As Surya performs his service to the Lord. The 7 groups of 14 associates arrange the proper times for regular snow, heat, and rain throughout the universe. It's like working in a company. Everybody has their duty. Yeah, corporation. Surya's the CEO. Hey. Okay, text 19. My dear king, in his orbit through Bhumandala, the sun god traverses a distance of 95,100,000 yojanas, or 800,000 miles, at the speed of 2,000 yojanas and 2 kroshas, or 16,004 miles in a moment. And thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 5th canto, 21st chapter of Bhagavatam, entitled Movements of the Sun. So we can go on to chapter 22 and a little summary there. And chapter 22 is the orbits of the planets. So now we'll hear about the movements of the planets. We heard about the sun, and we're going to hear about the orbits of the planets. So, structure of the universe was no exaggeration. We're getting the tour here. So this is the little summary in the beginning of the chapter. In this chapter, the orbits of the planets are described. According to the movements of the moon and other planets, all the inhabitants of the universe are prone to auspicious and inauspicious situations. This is referred to as the influence of the stars. The sun god, who controls the affairs of the entire universe, especially in regard to heat, light, seasonal changes, and so on, is considered an expansion of Narayan. He represents the 3 Vedas, Rig, Yajur, and Sama, and therefore he's known as Traimaya, the form of Lord Narayan. Sometimes the sun god is also called Surya Narayan. The sun god has expanded himself in 12 divisions, and thus he controls the 6 seasonal changes and causes winter, summer, rain, and so on. Yogis and karmis, following the Varnashram institution, who practice Hatha or Astanga Yoga, or who perform Agnihotra sacrifices, worship Surya Narayan for their own benefit. The demigod Surya is always in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan. Residing in outer space, which is in the middle of the universe between Bhuloka and Bhuvarloka, The sun rotates through the time circle of the zodiac, represented by 12 rashis or signs, and assumes different names according to the sign he is in. For the moon, every month is divided into 2 fortnights. Similarly, according to solar calculations, a month is equal to the time the sun spends in one constellation. 2 months constitute one season, and there are 12 months in a year. The entire area of the sky is divided into 2 halves, each representing an ayana, the course traversed by the sun within a period of 6 months. The sun travels sometimes slowly, and sometimes swiftly, and sometimes at a moderate speed. In this way, it travels within the 3 worlds, consisting of the heavenly planets, the earthly planets, and outer space. These orbits are referred to by great learned scholars by the name Samvatsara, Parivatsara, Idavatsara, Anuvatsara, and Vatsara. The moon is situated 100,000 yojanas above the rays of the sunshine. Day and night on the heavenly planets and Pitriloka are calculated according to its waning and waxing. Above the moon, by a distance of 200,000 yojanas, are some stars, and above these stars are Sukragraha, Venus, whose influence is always auspicious for the inhabitants of the entire universe. Above Sukragraha by 200,000 yojas is Buddhagraha, whose influence is sometimes auspicious and sometimes inauspicious. Next, above Buddhagraha by 200,000 yojanas is Angaraka, Mars, which almost always has an unfavorable influence. Above Angaraka, by another 200,000 yojanas, is the planet called Brihaspati Graha, Jupiter, which is always very favorable for qualified Brahmins. Above Brihaspati Graha is the planet Sanaishchara, Saturn, which is very inauspicious, and above Saturn is a group of 7 stars occupied by great saintly persons who are always thinking of the welfare of the entire universe. These 7 stars circumambulate Dhruvaloka, which is the residence of Lord Vishnu within this universe. Text 1. King Parikshit inquired from Sukadeva Goswami, "My dear Lord, you've already affirmed the truth that the supremely powerful sun god travels around Dhruvaloka with both Dhruvaloka and Mount Sumeru on his right. Yet, at the same time, the sun god faces the signs of the zodiac and keeps Sumeru and Dhruvaloka on his left. How can we reasonably accept that the sun god proceeds with Sumeru and Dhruvaloka on both his left and right simultaneously?" Text 2. Sri Sukadeva Goswami clearly answered, "When a potter's wheel is moving, and small ants located on that big wheel are moving with it, one can see that their motion is different from that of the wheel because they appear sometimes on one part of the wheel and sometimes on another. Similarly, the signs and constellations with Sumeru and Dhruvaloka on their right move with the wheel of time, and the ant-like sun and other planets move with them. The sun and planets, however, are seen in different signs and constellations at different times. This indicates that their motion is different from that of the zodiac and the wheel of time itself." Text 3. The original cause of the cosmic manifestation is the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan. When great saintly persons, fully aware of the Vedic knowledge, offered prayers to the Supreme Person, he descended to this material world in the form of the sun to benefit all the planets and purify fruitive activities. He divided himself into 12 parts and created seasonal forms, beginning with spring. In this way, he created the seasonal qualities such as heat, cold, and so on. Text 4. According to the system of 4 varnas and 4 ashrams, people generally worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan, who is situated as the Sun God. With great faith, they worship the Supreme Personality as the Supersoul, according to ritualistic ceremonies handed down in the 3 Vedas, such as Agnihotra and similar higher and lower fruitivacts, and according to the process of mystic yoga. In this way, they very easily attain the ultimate goal of life. With great faith, they worship the Supreme Personality as the Supersoul. So the sun is like the Supersoul of the universe. Lord Narayan himself says he himself manifests as the sun god within the universe, like the Supersoul. And it's not for him. He's not come there to enjoy his personal pastimes. He's expanded something like Supersoul to oversee the actions and activities in the material world, to see that everything is supplied and running so that everything can run smoothly there for the living entities. They'll have what they need, and to have an opportunity to become unattached to the material universe. But since there's some attachment there, and that's why everyone's come to the material universe, the Lord is so kind, he's making sure everything is being supplied. If they insist on living in that way, then they have what they need to live. He's supplying everything to everyone. But he knows he can never really be happy there. This is not, it's against their ultimate nature. Living entities are spirit. They belong in the spiritual world, engaged in spiritual activities. But if they insist on exercising their desire for independence, then there's an arrangement where they can act as if they're independent. But we can see from this, no one's independent of anything. Everything's being supplied. So it's an illusion. But if they insist, then all right, at least the illusion is there and they can live like that. Text 5. The sun god, who is Narayan or Vishnu, the soul of all the worlds, is situated in outer space between the upper and lower portions of the universe. Passing through 12 months on the wheel of time, the sun comes in touch with 12 different signs of the zodiac and assumes 12 different names according to those signs. The aggregate of those 12 months is called the samvatsar, or an entire year. According to lunar calculations, 2 fortnights, one of the waxing moon and the other of the waning, form 1 month. That same period is 1 day and night for the planet Pitriloka. According to stellar calculations, a month equals 2 1/4 constellations. When the sun travels for 2 months, a season passes, and therefore seasonal changes are considered parts of the body of the year. Text 6. Thus, the time the sun takes to rotate through half of outer space is called an ayana, or its period of movement, in the north or in the south. So we previously heard how there's a space between the upper half of the universe and the lower half, and that is what is referred to as outer space. And the sun is traveling in that outer space between the upper and lower planetary systems. Text 7. The sun god has 3 speeds: slow, fast, and moderate. The time he takes to travel entirely around the spheres of heaven, earth, and space at these 3 speeds is referred to by learned scholars by the 5 names Samvatsara, Parivatsara, Idavatsara, Anuvatsara, and Vatsara. Prabhupada's commentary. According to solar astronomical calculations, each year extends 6 days beyond the calendar year, and according to lunar calculations, each year is 6 days shorter. Therefore, because of the movements of the sun and moon, there is a difference of 12 days between the solar and lunar years. As the Samvatsara, Parivatsara, Idavatsara, Anuvatsara, and Vatsara pass by, 2 extra months are added within each 5 years. This makes a 6th Samvatsara, but because that Samvatsara is extra, the solar system is calculated according to the above 5 names. Text 8. We understand that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj Prabhupada was recognized as being very astute in these astronomical calculations. So undoubtedly he was well acquainted with the structure of the universe and the movements of the suns and the planets. Some of his writings were very detailed about this structure. Text 8. Above the rays of the sunshine by a distance of 100,000 yojanas or 800,000 miles is the moon, which travels at a speed faster than that of the sun. In 2 lunar fortnights, the moon travels through the equivalent of a samvatsara of the sun. In 2 1/4 days, it passes through a month of the sun, and in 1 day, it passes through a fortnight of the sun. So, the earth planets are below, and the moon is a heavenly planet, it's above, and the sun is traveling in what's called the space between upper and lower. So here, the moon is 100,000 yojanas above the sun. So that's why it's described that, contrary to material scientists, the moon is actually further away than the sun from us. We're situated on the earthly planet. Then there's the outer space, which is where the sun is rotating and moving. And then further away is up above, in the other half of the universe is the heavenly planets, and that's where the moon is located. So the moon is actually further away from the earthly planets than the sun is. So that's why Srila Prabhupada highly doubted that they'd actually gone to the moon, because it is so far away. He said they went somewhere. He's not sure where they went, but it wasn't actually the moon. They went somewhere. Prabhupada's commentary. When we take into account that the moon is 100,000 yojanas or 800,000 miles above the rays of the sunshine, here it is. It is very surprising that the modern excursions to the moon could be possible. Since the moon is so distant, how space vehicles could go there is a doubtful mystery. Modern scientific calculations are subject to one change after another, and therefore they're uncertain. We have to accept the calculations of the Vedic literature. These Vedic calculations are steady. The astronomical calculations made long ago and recorded in Vedic literature are correct even now. Whether the Vedic calculations or modern ones are better may remain a mystery for others, but as far as we're concerned, we accept Vedic calculations to be correct. So Prabhupada's making the point that they're always changing their calculations and their methods of calculations from one year to another, from one scientist to another. They are always changing and expanding on their way of trying to measure and perceive. Whereas the Vedic calculations have remained steady and they're correct. So, which do we prefer? Something that's unsteady, always changing, and subject to the 4 defects of the conditioned soul: cheating, making mistakes, imperfect senses. There's one more, I can't remember. Oh, subject to illusion. Do we want to accept their calculations? Or do we want to accept the calculations made by the realized souls based on Vedic knowledge, given directly from the creator of the universe? It's like having the user's manual. So, we'll go for the user's manual coming from the manufacturer. Text 9. When the moon is waxing, the illuminated portions of it increase daily, thus creating day for the demigods and night for the Pitas. When the moon is waning, however, it causes night for the demigods and day for the Pitas. In this way, the moon passes through each constellation of stars in 30 muhurtas, an entire day. The moon is the source of nectarine coolness that influences the growth of food grains, and therefore the moon god is considered the life of all living entities. He is consequently called Jiva, the chief living being within the universe. Jiva. It's nice. Chief living entity within the universe. Text 10. Because the moon is full of all potentialities, it represents the influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The moon is the predominating deity of everyone's mind, and therefore the moon god is called Manomaya. He's also called Annamaya because he gives potency to all herbs and plants, and he's called Amritamaya because he's the source of life for all living entities. The moon pleases the demigods, Pitas, human beings, animals, birds, reptiles, trees, plants, and all other living entities. Everyone is satisfied by the presence of the moon. Therefore the moon is also called Sarvamaya, all-pervading. Wow. Soothing, cooling effect of the moon. The sun and the moon. The appearance of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda are compared to the appearance of the sun and the moon. No one can live without the sun, supplying heat and light. No one can live without the moon, supplying life to all the living entities by its soothing rays. And he gives potency to the plants and herbs. In that way, he's the source of life for all living entities. The sun and the moon. Appearance of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda compared to the appearance of the sun and the moon. Giving life to the devotees, spiritual life, devotional life, and giving potency to the devotees. Devotional potency. Text 11. There are many stars located 200,000 yojanas, or 1,600,000 miles above the moon. By the supreme will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they're fixed to the wheel of time, and thus they rotate with Mount Sumeru on their right, their motion being different from that of the sun. There are 28 important stars headed by Abhijit. Short commentary here. The stars referred to herein are 1,600,000 miles above the sun, and thus they are 4 million miles above the earth. Text 12. Some 1,600,000 miles above this group of stars is the planet Venus. Which moves at almost exactly the same pace as the sun according to swift, slow, and moderate movements. Sometimes Venus moves behind the sun, sometimes in front of the sun, and sometimes along with it. Venus nullifies the influence of planets that are obstacles to rainfall. Consequently, its presence causes rainfall, and it is therefore considered very favorable for all living beings within this universe. This has been accepted by learned scholars. So Venus is connected to rainfall, which is necessary for all living entities. Water. 13. Mercury is described to be similar to Venus in that it moves sometimes behind the sun, sometimes in front of the sun, and sometimes along with it. It is 1,600,000 miles above Venus, or 7,200,000 miles above Earth. Mercury, which is the son of the moon, is almost always very auspicious for the inhabitants of the universe, but when it does not move along with the sun, it forebodes cyclones, dust, irregular rainfall, and waterless clouds. In this way, it creates fearful conditions due to inadequate or excessive rainfall. So Mercury interferes with like that. When it is the son of the moon, it's produced from the moon, and when it travels along with the sun, it's very auspicious. But when it doesn't move with the sun, does not move along with the sun, it causes disturbances. Text 14. Situated 1,600,000 miles above Mercury, or 8,800,000 miles above Earth, is the planet Mars. If this planet does not travel in a crooked way, it crosses through each sign of zodiac in 3 fortnights. In this way, travels through all 12, one after another. It almost always creates unfavorable conditions in respect to rainfall and other influences. So Mercury is pretty much always inauspicious, causes disturbances wherever it goes. Yes. Text 15. Situated 1,600,000 miles above Mars, or 10,400,000 miles above Earth, is the planet Jupiter, which travels through one sign of the zodiac within the period of a parivatsar. If its movement is not curved, the planet Jupiter is very favorable to the Brahmins of the universe. Getting some astrology here, Vedic astrology, how living entities were all affected by the movements of the planets in many ways, but here being given information directly how the movements of the planets affects the weather and the rainfall and the temperature and like this. Text 16. Situated 1,600,000 miles above Jupiter, or 12 million miles above Earth, is the planet Saturn, which passes through one sign of the zodiac in 30 months and covers the entire zodiac circle in 30 anuvatsars. The planet is always very inauspicious for the universal situation. Saturn is always, not almost always, just wherever it goes, it causes a problem. Saturn. Text 17. Situated 8,800,000 miles above Saturn, or 20,800,000 miles above Earth, are the 7 saintly sages who are always thinking of the well-being of the inhabitants of the universe. They circumambulate the supreme abode of Lord Vishnu, known as Dhruvaloka, the pole star. Prabhupada's commentary. Srila Madhvacharya quotes the following verse from Bhāgavata Purāṇa. Basically, the translation is, Lord Vishnu, who is the source of knowledge and transcendental bliss, has assumed the form of Sishumar in the 7th heaven, which is situated in the topmost level of the universe. All other planets, beginning with the sun, exist under the shelter of the Sishumar planetary system. So the Sishumar planetary system is the very highest planetary system within the universe, and it's 7 planets that circumambulate Dhruvaloka, where the Lord resides, on Dhruva's planet. And the 7 sages have these are the predominating personalities on these planets, and they're always meditating and praying and offering their well wishes for the living entities in the entire universe. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 5th canto, 22nd chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Orbits of the Planets. So, this planetarium that's being designed and constructed in Mayapur, it's no small task, and it's not a small structure either. It's very, very large. Awesome. Hare Krishna.